Hi, I'm Dave, and welcome to my video. Thanks for checking it out. We're going to be covering some basic hand techniques today, some basic exercises to give you some strength and speed, and we're going to go into some slap studies so you can develop some funk bass lines on your own, and then we're going to deal with some improvisational ideas, dealing with the modes and sequences derived from the modes. Before we get started, though, let's tune up our instruments. First, we'll do the high G string. Next is D. The A string. And E. One more time, just check that out. G. All right, let's get to it. Okay, in this segment, I'd like to discuss some basic techniques for the left and right hand and show you some exercises that will help you build some strength in your hands and acquire some facility on the instrument. Let's start with some basic hand positions. In the left hand, for instance. You want to keep your thumb halfway behind the neck, not put too much pressure on it. It's basically just a balancing tool, and it needs to have a lot of freedom of movement. And then across from that, your thumb can lie, okay, even with that. Your left hand should be arched. Try to play on your fingertips. And basically, you're going to cover one finger per fret. That's one position. Okay. Now, try not to bring your thumb up or to bring the palm of your hand up either. You always want to keep space in here so that you can keep those fingers arched and play on your fingertips. Most of these exercises that I'm going to show you were designed to be played with alternate picking in the right hand. So before you start playing these left hand things, you can just practice the alternate picking by keeping the strings muted with your left hand and practice different groups with your right hand. Groups of 4 notes per string, 3 notes per string, and 2 notes per string. And any combination thereof, just so you're familiar with whatever combination you run into, but keep those fingers alternating. Okay, now let's move on to some warm-ups and some strength-building exercises that I like to do. The first one I'd like to show you is called the spider exercise. This was shown to me a long time ago by one of my teachers. It's a great warm-up thing, gets your hands really going, all the digits of your hand. It's pretty simple. We're going to start with our first finger on low F, and we're going to play up chromatically, 1 finger per fret. Okay? Then we're going to move to the A string, and we're going to move up another fret, so we'll start on 2nd fret B, and play the same thing, etc. 3rd fret on the D string, 4th fret on the G string. Then keep moving up, 5th fret on the D string. Okay, and you want to end up on high G sharp, the 13th fret of the G string. Make sure you're alternating. Okay, then we'll go backwards from there using our 4th finger as our guide, and we'll go back 4, 3, 2, 1, going down 1 fret and 1 string at a time. You want to end up back on low F. If you don't, you missed a move somewhere. Okay, let me play that in context with my friendly drum machine here. This is 16th notes. against an eighth note pulse. Okay, great. Now, one other thing I'd like to point out that you can do with this exercise is pretty interesting, is we can start getting into some odd phrasings. Before we actually approach the harmonic and melodic aspects of it, we can start feeling some different kinds of phrases using these exercises. Now, what I like to do here is play a 4-note finger grouping as triplets. Okay, so the accents are going to change every beat, and it feels kind of weird, but it'll start you hearing some polyrhythmic phrases. So let me start with eighth note triplets first and play a little bit of what that's going to sound like for you. Great. Okay. Now it can get really interesting if you take it into 16th note triplets. Now I'd like to just give you a couple strength building exercises for each digit of the left hand. First we'll start with some 2-finger groupings that'll really help strengthen especially the third finger, which is our weakest finger. We need to work on this one the most, so this exercise will help you strengthen that. Again, be careful to always play on your fingertips with this. Make your third finger work. Simple exercise. You can play it in any area of the neck. It just goes like this. We'll just play 3, 4, 3, 4, 3, 4. It's pretty simple, but it really lets you be conscious of what your third finger is doing. Then we can work it even further, play 2, 3. Same concept. Etc. 1, 3. Then we'll go to 1, 4. And 2, 4. Etc. Now, played in context, I like to run these straight through and just get my hands really working here. So let's see if we can do that. Play 16th notes against this. Okay, now as you get the metronome markings up on that, that'll really give your left hand a workout. Just be careful, don't strain the muscles in here. It can get tiring. All right, we can also play some 4-finger combinations. Obviously, there's a lot of different ones. You can use any combination of 4 fingers to get a different exercise. I'll just take 1, 3, 2, 4, again starting on the first fret on the E string, move up to the A string. Now, once I've played it on all the strings, I move up a fret, play it on all the strings in the opposite direction. Okay, great. That can be really tough when you get into some of the more complicated ones with the third finger, and again, when you start pushing the metronome markings up. Now, just one more quick thing you can do with that is let's try to get the right hand involved and get into a little cross picking. You can take 1, 3, 2, 4, but play it as double stops. Let's look at it as fifths. And we'll start on the low F, but we'll skip the third finger to the A string. And the second finger back to the E string, fourth finger on the A string. And then we'll move it just like the previous one. Etc. And you can take that even further too and do 3 string combinations, play octaves, if you really want to get crazy with it. All right, now that you've acquired some strength, some dexterity on the instrument, Let's cover one other aspect of bass playing you're going to need to deal with, and that's developing a reach or opening up your hands. These are some stretching exercises that I think will help you do that. As a bass player, we're going to need to cover one more fret than a normal position comfortably, and that can be quite difficult because of the scale of the bass. In other words, our normal position would be first finger to fourth finger is 4 frets. We need to be able to comfortably play first finger to fourth finger 5 frets. Okay? Now I think these exercises may help you start developing that reach. This also becomes important if you start playing really involved voicings or anything like that. Again, we'll start on low F. And the main thing here is to keep our first finger planted in the first fret because we want to go for maximum stretch. Okay? Then let's go as far as we can to the 5th fret, keeping our first finger in the 1st fret. And then just work it across that 1st fret. Here we don't want to move up because this is where the maximum distance is. Now, that may be a little tough at first, so you might want to start a little higher on the neck. Let's say A to C sharp. Now, as you get comfortable with that, again, start moving it down the neck until you can comfortably play a major third from 1st fret F. Okay, that's 1 to 4. Then we want to stretch 1 to 3 and get a 4th fret reach. And then, of course, 1 to 2. All right. Now, one other thing you can do with this is 3-finger combinations. These really start working your hand also. First one we'll do would be 1, 3, 4. The 3rd finger stretching to the 4th fret, and then the 4th finger to the 5th fret. And then you'll move that the same way. 1, 3, 4. Okay. Then 1, 2, and 3. All right, great. One other thing about stretching, these things can be painful at times, so don't overdo it. You can really hurt your hands by playing these too much or too often. If you start to feel pain, stop playing. You're just going to be damaging things. So stop playing, shake your hand out, and relax for a few minutes. One thing I found that really helps me loosen up is to go back to the spider exercise. And that really loosens my hand up and makes it feel a whole lot better. All right, now you've got a whole repertoire of exercises that are strictly non-musical. They're just gymnastics, they're just for conditioning, and that's okay, but don't lose sight of the priorities. The most important thing is to develop a good musical sense. These are just conditioning exercises, and if you get too caught up in them, you'll lose a lot of time you should be spending on learning how to play music. Now, while we're still in the exercise segment, let me show you one exercise that's going to start you thinking more musically, but still use a lot of the techniques we've just talked about. It'll help you work on stretching and some various other finger techniques. Now, what we're going to do is 2-octave arpeggios, okay? Major to minor, alternating up the neck. Let's start with a 2-octave F major arpeggio. Again, first finger on the E string, 1st fret. Then that's going to go to 4th finger. Then 1 on C. F. Stretch your 4th finger up. 1. Now here's where you have to be conscious of your top note at all times. You have to be looking ahead for that top octave. That's a big jump. Perfect 4th on the G string. And then back down. Let's make it even a little more complicated and use an alternate fingering, one that sounds better and feels a little better for descending. So now you'll have to think of 2 things for each arpeggio. We'll come down 4, 1, 3 on the D string, A note, 4 on F. So we're rolling across here. Stretch down to C, and 4th finger, and 1st. So that looks like this in its entirety. Now, after we play that, in successive 8th notes, what we want to do is move up to F sharp and play a minor arpeggio. This is a Jocko exercise, by the way. And we'll do the same concept. 1, 4, 1, 1, 4. Again, C your high octave. And then come back down with the rolling motion. Okay, that's F sharp minor in 2 octaves with 2 different fingerings. Now, what I like to do with this, again, to get into some weird phrasing, is play eighth notes non-stop. So the root note of each new arpeggio will not always be on the downbeat. That'll sound like this. Let me play it with the drum machine. Okay? That's alternating major and minor arpeggios up and down the neck. Okay, this next segment is going to deal with slap style playing. I'll try to give you a few different exercises and ideas you can use to develop some funk lines on your own. Again, I want to start with some basics of this style. It can be a little frustrating if you haven't done it before, so let me give you a few pointers just to get you rolling, and then we'll get into some more complicated ideas. Okay, now the hardest thing at first is to just produce a good, consistent sound, with your thumb especially. So let's just try playing a C note on the A string and work with our thumb, see if we can get that note to sound consistently. Now what you want to do is strike the string with the bone of your thumb, the hard part there, and play up towards the fingerboard so you're actually hitting on the frets. And another thing you want to consider is that it's all in the wrist. Don't try to pick with your thumb. Use your wrist to slap. It's actually slap style. Now, the next aspect of that is we're going to start popping with the first finger, or if you're more comfortable, the second finger of your right hand. I use my first finger. We can start playing even eighth notes, just trying to get. Now, what we should do is move that idea down to the E string. A lot of this style playing is done with octaves, so you're going to be playing in 2 string groups, the A and the G string, which presents a problem of getting in on the A string without hitting the E string. But the G is free and clear. Then the E and D string, the E string is free and clear, but you have to get your first finger in under the G string. So the exercises I'm going to show you practice both ways, on the A and G string and the E and D string. Now, let's just try some simple 16th notes on the A string, and then we'll move it to the E string with the drum machine here. Okay, once you're pretty comfortable with that and you're getting a good sound all the time from your thumb, you can start moving around a little bit. Now, let's take that idea and put it into a simple pattern that we can use for the rest of these exercises. We'll just play C first, then we'll go to E flat, D, D flat. Then play that on the E string. Okay, that should make it a little more interesting when you're practicing. Now, let's go on to another variation. This is a very percussion-oriented style of playing. So we need to get familiar with a lot of different combinations between the thumb and the first finger. Much like a drummer does different left and right hand combinations called paradiddles and stuff like that. We need to be versatile with any grouping we may run into. Now, let's just start with 2 strokes of the thumb and then a pop. Now let's put that up to tempo. Okay, that's one alternative. Now let's put the pop in the middle. Okay, and we can put that up to tempo. Great. Now let's play 2 pops on top. We'll play a thumb, and then 2 pop notes in the rhythm of. Okay, next technique I'd like to show you is called ghost notes or muted notes. Simple idea, just mute the notes with the left hand. In other words, we're not going to play a pitch in this hand, and we're going to strike normally with the right hand. You just want to avoid getting any tones in the left hand. And you want to be very careful not to play over harmonics so that they start sounding. Strictly percussive. Now, let's try an idea using regular notes and ghost notes together. We'll play thumb pop with a C and a C octave, and then we'll mute the next 2 16th notes. So it will sound like. Okay, now from there we can move on to hammer-ons. This is a technique you'll find used quite a bit in all aspects of this playing. And again, here we can use it 2 ways. We can either hammer on with a pop note or using our thumb. Now let me show you a little idea using a hammer-on with a pop note. We'll start with just a B flat to a C. I'm thinking in C minor or C7 here, so the 7th to the root. And then we'll play 2 thumb notes. Now let me show you a lick you can use that'll incorporate both hammer-ons and some ghost notes. We're going to start with that same hammer-on from the B flat. Then we're going to go to 2 ghost notes with our thumb, and then hammer-on from F to G. Then and 2 more ghost notes with the thumb. Go down to the 1st fret on the D string, E flat. Hammer-on from E flat to F, 1st to 3rd fret. Do 1 ghost note with the thumb, and then grab the B flat and slide to C. So be. All right, that can be a cool fill if you're playing a regular kind of groove thing. So I'll try to throw it into that context. Let's move on to hammer-on using the thumb. We'll start with an open A note and hammer on our 1st finger C there. Then let's play another C with the thumb and then grab the octave. So we have 4 16th notes that sound like this. Now, when you start using some tricks like these, you can really start developing some speed with these exercises. Let me show you what that sounds like in context. Okay, you can also use this technique for this little triplet fill that I do. This is pretty impressive sometimes. We'll do the same basic idea. Thumb, hammer, thumb. And then we're just going to do some regular plucking up top. And if you get it fast, you can start sounding like. Now let's try to put all these things together and into a little line we can use and you can groove on and practice at home, practice with a drum machine, practice with your band, whatever. It's a lick that I've liked to play and a lot of my students seem to enjoy, so I'll show it to you. It sounds like this, and then I'll go through it slowly and show you step by step. Okay? Now, we're going to start with the low E with the thumb. We're going to pop a C sharp, which is the 6th fret on the G string. Pop the next fret, D. Okay, then there's a rest, and a 3rd pop in a row, which will be an interesting coordination exercise for you. And we're going to mute these next 3 notes. Pop, thumb, pop, which will set us up for our thumb on the C sharp octave, D octave. Second measure starts off the same as the first. Then we're going to add some fills on the bottom end. Thumb, hammer on 5th fret to 7th fret on the E string, A to B. Thumb, hammer on 5th to 7th fret on the A string. Then play a G, 5th fret on the D string. E, 7th fret on the A string. So let's hear what that sounds like. The last thing I'd like to talk about in terms of slap style playing is a technique called left hand muting. We're going to start using our left hand to generate some percussive notes, as we have done so far with the right hand. We're just going to use the left hand to slap the bass like that. So let me show you some exercises that could get you comfortable with that technique. The first one, we'll just play an open thumb note, then we'll slap the bass with our left hand, thumb again with a muted note, so you'll keep your left hand down, and then a 4th note, thumb open. So that's 4 16th notes. All right, now let's bring some pop notes into this technique. We'll use that on the 3rd partial of the 16th note phrase. We'll do open thumb note, slap the bass with the left hand, pop, thumb, muted. So we got. All right, lastly, let's try to put the pop note 4th, and we'll play an actual note. We'll play a D on the 7th fret of the G string. Okay, so we'll have thumb, slap with the left hand, mute, pop the D. Okay, now this can be really cool if you walk the first finger up and down the G string. You can start getting some melodic lines kind of happening in there. Okay, so you can experiment with that and see where it leads you. I'd like to close out this part with another lick you can learn and play with. I'd like to make one more point. This one is an E, like so many of them are. But you should try to translate most of these techniques to closed position keys like G and B flat. A lot of guys have a lot of chops in the open string keys, and they get to G or B flat or D flat, and they're out to lunch. So all this can apply if you practice it. It's a little more difficult, but it can be done. So work with it and see what you can come up with, and you'll be a lot better off on a record date or something as far as coming up with a creative bass line. All right, now let me show you this last lick. We're just going to start with 2 thumb notes and then a slap note with the left hand and pop. Then we're going to play a C sharp with our thumb and slide up to D. Now let's do that again and add a ghost note with the thumb after the D. And then that'll conclude the first measure. We're going to hammer on from high D on the G string to E, pop note. So the first measure sounds like. Okay, now the second measure starts the same as the first. Then we're going to throw in our favorite pentatonic lick. Hammer on from the 5th fret on the E string to the 7th fret, 5th fret A string, So that'd be, second measure sounds like, okay? Third measure will be the same as the first. Then we'll throw in another cool little lick at the end there. Okay, that's the whole lick. Let's jump into the area of soloing and developing some solo concepts. And maybe I can give you some ideas about what you can do if you're ever stuck in a rut and you want to get some fresh ideas happening. First, let's talk about the modes. I don't know how many of you know what the modes are, but let me familiarize you with them briefly. The modes are the chord scales that we use to improvise, and they're derived from each tone of the major scale. So there's 7 tones in the major scale, consequently there's 7 modes. If we're playing a C major scale, that's the C Ionian mode, that arrangement of notes. Same as the C major scale, okay? Now if you took that same arrangement of notes, no sharps or flats, and started on D, you'd have the D Dorian mode. If you looked at the 1st, 3rd, and 5th, and 7th tone of the Dorian mode, you'd find that you had a minor 7th chord. So this particular mode is used to improvise over minor 7th chords. Now you'll find that there's more minor 7th chords within each key, so you start to, you have to learn about chord relationships to really determine what key you're in and what mode you need to improvise. Let me show you a system I have for learning all the modes as easily as possible in all the keys. We're going to start them all on the E string with our first finger. Let's start in the key of F in this instance. And here we'll just play a major scale. And we'll extend it up to a 5th above the octave. Okay. Then we'd move to the next tone of the F major scale, which is G, and we can play the Dorian mode. Now, with all these modes, there's basically only going to be 3 fingering combinations. So don't get too bent out of shape about it. We're either going to play 2 whole steps, 1, 2, 4, or a whole step and a half step, 1, 3, 4, or a half step and a whole step, 1, 2, 4. So as you're learning these modes, apply that to it and you'll be pretty right on as far as fingering is concerned. Now, another thing is, in each key there's only 7 fingerings. So once you learn the shapes, you can transpose them to any other key. So there's really only 7 shapes to learn and you're there. So let's continue on through the modes in F. The A Phrygian mode. Okay. B flat Lydian. It's a lot like a major scale with a raised 4th. C Mixolydian, which you play over dominant chords. You'll find that this has a major 3rd with a flatted 7th. A lot like a major scale also, with that flatted 7th in it. D Aeolian. And then E Locrian. Now you don't get a lot of call to play a Locrian mode because the chord that's built off is a minor 7 flat 5 chord. But one thing you might want to think about is considering it as starting the C Mixolydian mode on the 3rd. Okay, so you can start applying these substitutions as you get more involved with this stuff. Some of this material may take a little research, so just dig in and it'll start to make sense to you. Now, the next thing you want to do, or what I would like to do, is play these through all the keys. So I use the cycle of 4ths. Our next key would be B flat, and we want to start with the lowest note on the E string, the one that's closest to the nut, and play the mode from there. Now in B flat, the lowest note would be F. So we have to figure out which tone of the B flat scale F is. It's what? The fifth, right. So it's going to take the Mixolydian mode. So we'll start B flat in Mixolydian. Aeolian. Etc. Now just to give you an example, let's try a couple sharp keys, like A would start where? Right, F sharp Aeolian. Etc., etc. Okay, now let me show you a couple exercises I do with these to get familiar with them and go through the keys. First thing we can do is just play straight 16th notes up and down and keep moving the modes up the neck. Let me play with the drum machine here. That's all the modes in the key of F. If you can take this through all the keys, you'll really start to get a good understanding of keys and key relationships, chords, and their chord scales, and you'll really start to know the fretboard really well. So it might be something you want to spend some time with. Now, let me show you another exercise we can do with that. Getting back to the phrasing I talked about when we did the spider exercise, let's put this into 16th note triplets. And to make it even a little more difficult, let's go up one mode in triplets, shift with our fourth finger, and go down the next mode. Then shift up with our first finger, etc. Let's see what that sounds like. Before we go on to developing some lines and licks using those modes, let me just touch on arpeggios briefly. You can apply the same kind of system to those, and it will provide you with some vertical movement, which is really interesting on the bass because most bass players play very much from a scale perspective. So if you can start working some arpeggios into your playing, it'll sound great. Now let me just give you an example of, for instance, G major 7 with that same approach. Playing all the inversions starting with the one closest to the nut. Now, the note in G major 7th that's closest to the nut is F sharp, the 7th. So we've got to figure out the four shapes for this chord. We'll start with the 7th. Okay, then we'd move up to root position, starting on the G. From the 3rd and the 5th. Now that's the four inversions of a G major 7th. Now let's run those together, see what it sounds like. Now if you can start putting those together and then do the dominant chords and the minor 7th chords and minor 7 flat 5 chords, you'll have a real good understanding of harmony and a real good understanding of the fretboard. You really have to see where you're going with these kinds of things, so it's a good exercise. Okay, now let's move on to some soloing concepts. We'll go back to the modes for that, but just remember this all applies to arpeggios as well. Okay, now you're stuck for a lick and you're saying, well, playing a scale is really boring and that doesn't really make it. You need a little variety. So let's take a real simplistic approach and figure out what we can do to get some variety happening. Well, the first thing I'd say do is let's play 4-note scale groupings. We'll play up 4 notes of the scale. I'm in C major now. Okay, then we'll go back to the 2nd note of the scale, D, and play a 4-note group from there. Okay, etc. Okay, now instead of having a straight scale, we have a lick that sounds like. Now you can reverse that lick on the way back and do the same thing. Say we're starting on the 5th of C. You can just come down in groups of 4. Okay. See what that sounds like in context. Okay, now that's one idea to get you started playing some licks, but you go, well, that's not that hip. You know, it's still pretty straight ahead. You can really hear the scale. So what can we do to change it up? Well, let's do something with it rhythmically. Let's displace it by 1/16th note. You can take that exact pattern, and by starting it on the of beat 4, you can get a much cooler sound than just playing it on the downbeats. So let's hear what that sounds like. 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, so now you can go anywhere with that idea. You can start on the E of 1, displace it 1/16th note the other way. 2, 3, 4. Okay, we can take this concept even farther out and start introducing some polyrhythmic ideas like I discussed earlier. And we can take these 4-note groups and play them as 16th note triplets, where the accent will be changing every beat, and it's going to be the exact same pattern, but it's going to feel weird rhythmically, so you should work with it slowly at first. Let me play it as 8th note triplets first, and then 16th note triplets. And then you can play it down too. Now, 16th note triplets, it starts to get pretty hip. Okay, now that's a lot of material right there. Remember, apply it to the arpeggios and all the different modes, and you'll have a wealth of solo material. As you continue experimenting with melodic ideas, just bear in mind, you can do any combination of notes. You can go up in groups of 4, and then down 4, and then all the other stuff applies to that too. Or start down 4, and again, the rhythmic variations apply, the 16th note triplets apply. So just from those 3 patterns, we've got about 40 licks to deal with. Now, if you really want to get strange, you can get into some of the things like Jaco did. His phrasing was based on 5-note groupings, but as regular 16th notes. So here's the next step we can go to. Instead of just 4-note groupings, we'll take it to 5-note groupings. So he would take a 16th note pattern. He would play regular 16th notes, but phrased in groups of 5. So he'd start the scale going down. Okay, broken all into groups of 5, but the pulse is just in 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, you can also extend this idea to 6 notes, and this works really well with the pentatonic scale, which is a 5-note scale, but if you add the low octave onto it, of the starting note, you can make it a 6-note pattern. Let's take the E pentatonic scale starting on A, on the 14th fret of the G string. Play the E pentatonic, write down A, G, E, D, B, A. Now that same configuration of notes will happen here, starting on G, then on E, D. Now if you play that straight down, it starts to become a pretty cool lick for descending. So now you've got 4 notes and 5 notes and 6-note groupings, which you can get a lot of material from to work with. I'd like to demonstrate some of the sequences and lines we've been talking about in a progression consisting of 5 chords. It's basically in C minor, which is relative to E flat major, so we can look to E flat for the modes to play over the chords. We start with the C minor 7th chord, and that'll take the Aeolian mode, because it's the 6th of E flat. And it moves to an A flat major chord with a sharp 11 or a flat 5, the A flat Lydian mode. You have that D note in there, which is still relative to E flat. Then it goes to F minor and B flat, which is a 2-5 in E flat, so you could play Dorian to Mixolydian there. And then a turnaround change, basically a G dominant chord, G7, which can be approached several ways. You can either play the Mixolydian mode based off of G from that, or a preferable approach is to borrow from the C harmonic minor and play a G altered mode. So if you have a C harmonic minor scale, that introduces that B that gives you the dominant sound. And we'll just base that and make G our root note. And that resolves very nicely back to the C minor. So let's check that out. Well, that about wraps it up. I hope you got some stuff you can use from the video and enough material to keep you working for a long time. Practice hard, and I look forward to hearing your next record. Thanks.